In this video, we are going to be working with lists and dictionaries in Python. Both of these are basic data structures, so we will be talking about what data structures are in Python and how we can use them. Open up Visual Studio Code and create a new file called lists.py, preferably in the same directory you've been doing your other Python development in. With lists, the main thing to understand is they make the process of holding data easier. So let's say you had x equals 10, or rather, let's go with names. So let's say we're creating a student directory. So we're working for a school and we want to store the names of a bunch of students. One thing you could do is you could actually take each student's name and make that a variable. So my name, Vishnu, you could say Vishnu equals Vishnu. So what this means is the variable Vishnu is equivalent to a string containing Vishnu. And then you could do that for each person. So you could say John equals John. And Stephen equals Stephen. But let's say we want to print this out. Then we would have to say print Vishnu plus, and you would have to add that space in, plus, and John, and plus, space, plus, Stephen. So first of all, you have to add these spaces in between each student. And if a regular school doesn't have 3 people, right? It has hundreds of students. Like my school, for example, used to have 700 people, right? So that's a lot of different variables to print. So if you wanted to print everything, this is what it would take times 700. Like you would have to print 700 names with spaces in between them. So if we're trying to print that out, this is what it would look like. If we run this file, you can see it prints Vishnu, John, Stephen with spaces in between them, but it's very, very inefficient because you have to type all of this out. So how do we make this process of creating a student directory much easier? That's where we use our first type of data structure we'll be covering today, lists. So instead of having this, I'll comment this just to show you how inefficient this is. I'll comment this as well. Instead of doing this, you create a list called students. And imagine lists in Python just like lists in real life, like a grocery list. It's a list of items. In this case, it's going to be a list of student names. So the first student, Vishnu, second student, John, third student, Stephen. First thing you note is that we don't have to create a separate variable for each name, right? You have all the names under one variable because all of those names are contained within one list. So a variable called students is basically a list containing every single name of every student. So if you just want to print this, you can just say print students. And now if you run that same command, you can see it prints out Vishnu, John, and Stephen, except this time with parentheses around them and quotation marks. And we'll learn how to fix that when we learn about for loops. But for now, it's basically doing the same task, except instead of being separated by a space, it's separated by quotation marks and a comma. Okay, perfect. Now I hope you see why lists are a much better way to keep and store data. But you might be wondering, well, with variables, you could go in and change the value of Vishnu. Let's say change my name to Stewart. You can go change the variable value. You can't do that with lists, I'm sure you're wondering, but you can. You can access specific elements in a list. So if I say students dot or students like this, oops, 1, and say that students at position 1 is, let's say, name. So we are looking for the name of students at 1. So what does this mean? Basically, we're creating a variable called name, and we're setting it equal to the student who is in the list students, who's in the position 1. Now we print name. We get John, not Vishnu. Why? Well, that's because Python runs on a 0-based index, like most other programming languages. So basically, we start counting from 0. So if we wanted to access my name, you'd have to go with this 0th position. And now you see it prints out Vishnu without any of that crazy formatting. Once we learn about loops, we can iterate through this list and print every name with a space in between. So don't worry too much about these quotation marks and commas and parentheses printing. We can fix that very easily. It's just something with formatting. So now that we've figured out how to access specific names, we understand the power of lists. We'll be doing much more. This is just an introduction with lists. Another data type that we can work with is called dictionaries. So if we create a new file called dictionary.py, again, these are just very brief introductions. Let's say we have the student directory, but our school grows, and we want to make this a little more complicated. We want to make our student directory house more information. So let's say we need each student, but apart from each student, we want, let's say, their grade. And let's say this is a high school, so it's going to be 9th through 12th. I'll just copy this in so I have the names of all the students. And I would like to point out, do you see how this is accomplished in just one line with one variable, and you can access each element separately, as opposed to this, which takes 3 lines. So that's where the simplicity comes in. That's why lists make storing data much more simpler than just storing each piece of data as a separate variable. So let's say we want to make this more complicated, add grade. What we do is we create a dictionary. So we say students is equivalent to a dictionary. So list, a list is symbolized by these square parentheses, but students is just a set of curly braces. And in between that, you have a key value pair. So let's say name, and name is going to be Vishnu. And then let's say the grade, or rather what works is, let's say Vishnu, and then 9, because I'm in 9th grade. I'm actually in 11th grade. Let's make that more accurate. So Vishnu is now connected to 11, and then John is now connected to, let's say, 10. So he's a 10th grader. And Stephen is a senior. Let's do this. So now we print out students. It's going to print out a dictionary with these key value pairs. So each key is Vishnu, John, Stephen, and each value is 11, 10, and 12. So now if we run list or dictionary.py, you can see, Vishnu is not defined. Okay, basically we need quotations around this. There we go. Because Vishnu, John, and Stephen are all names of students. So you have name, colon, grade. So in order to get their grade, you just have to put in their name. So now if we run it, you can see we get Vishnu 11, John 10, Stephen 12. So this is a very, very simple way to store more than one, I guess, piece of data for every child, right? For every student, you have their name as well as their grade. So lists and dictionaries are very powerful ways to basically store data. And once you learn about loops, you'll be able to iterate through these lists and dictionaries and pick out specific pieces of information. So we'll be working with these more in later tutorials, but for now, this is basically all you need to know about data structures in Python, lists and dictionaries. In the next video, we will be working with loops. So then we'll see how do we use lists and dictionaries with these loops. So I'll see you all in the next video.